Hey people, welcome back to the channel. My name is Gray, your one and only Corrupted Angel, and today we're talking about Steel Path. I know that this is a weird screen to start on, but hear me out. A lot of people I know are sort of getting into Warframe, and a big thing about Warframe is obviously Steel Path and the sort of degree in which a lot of people covet Steel Path. With that in mind, I wanted to talk a little bit about Steel Path and why I think you should approach it in a very specific way, so consider this a Steel Path beginner's guide. Number one thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to Steel Path is don't rush it. You really don't need to rush Steel Path. Steel Path is available as early as MR 10, I think, and just in general is really not something that you probably want to be getting into when you're MR10. Try and get yourself to MR16, as mentioned in my beginner's guide to Warframe the other day. You want to be getting yourself to MR16 as you get access to plenty of weapons, Warframes, and ribbon mods. This is really important to give you a large degree of variety for your options when going into Steel Path, because no one wants to play the same Warframe over and over again with the same weapon loadout over and over again, doing the entire Steel Path star chart. That's just not something that you want to do, I'm sure, and not something that you will ever need to do if you get yourself to MR16 for starters. Another thing that you want to probably do before you go into Steel Path is you probably want to make sure that you have access to any purchasable arcanes and things like that that you can get from various different vendors throughout the star chart, mainly Cascadia Flare and other arcanes like that from the Zariman, as well as access to a really nice amp from Little Duck on Fortuna. These are two really important parts about your gameplay experience in Steel Path. Amps will help increase your efficiency in terms of damage, as well as in terms of survivability in some cases, and your amp is really important for dealing with any Thorax enemies in Steel Path, as well as various other missions that mainly is the reason why you play Steel Path in the first place. I'm looking at you, Void Cascade. But the point is that a lot of people play this game mode specifically to farm certain things, and thus you need to be able to equip yourself to do those things in the first place. And amps and arcanes that you can obtain early on are really important for that little bit of venture. The other thing that I think you should focus on prior to doing any form of Steel Path is arbitrations. Do arbitrations. You unlock arbitrations the same time that you unlock the Steel Path, and by God, should that not be the case? I feel like you should be forced to do some arbitrations first, and I will explain why. Arbitrations are really important for two reasons. Number one, galvanized mods. These are some of the best mods in the game, and they are something that you should be focusing on yourself. Galvanized mods are really, really important for maximizing your damage, but not incredibly necessary. They're just very important for maximizing your damage, but they're not necessary for dealing enough damage. One thing I see a lot of people do is say that they need galvanized mods in order to play Steel Path, and that's not true. It just makes things a lot more comfortable, and that is the main reason why I always suggest doing arbitrations and getting these galvanized mods. The other thing that you can remember for arbitrations as well, though, is it will give you access to Grendel, which is a fantastic helmet option for going into Steel Path with on a lot of frames. A lot of frames want Nourish, and that is one of the reasons why you go Grendel. The other reason for doing arbitrations as well is Endo. It is probably one of the most efficient Endo farms really in the game. Obviously, I know there are other options, but a lot of those other options aren't as simple and easy and might require some extra bit of teamwork or some other variation of additional function that just isn't as simple as going into an arbitration for an hour, coming away with 20,000 endo and being happy. So make sure you do your arbitrations as much as possible. Play them, get yourself endo, and then upgrade a bunch of your mods. These are the most important things to do before you go into Steel Path, because it'll give you plenty of comfort of life in terms of playing the game, but it'll also give you plenty of damage and variety, and just in general open up the game as a whole to you. In terms of that though, how do we start a Steel Path build? What does a Steel Path build look like? I will show you a quick rundown of a very basic non-primed mod version of a Steel Path build for you guys, and also give you a couple of suggestions on weapons that you can take into Steel Path really, really early on and really, really easily. So let's quickly talk about it. So, now that we understand why not to rush into Steel Path, let's talk about a Steel Path build. We have Rhino here as my little test monkey, and he is essentially a great example of a Steel Path viable character that is going to work wonders for anyone playing the game at any level of initial Steel Path. Obviously, this probably won't be a level cap build that will go to level cap. I'm not building for level cap because I think that's just obviously unnecessary as a starting point for Steel Path. But here is the build. So to start off, we have Rhino. I am showing you this because he literally doesn't have a slot, and he has very poor arcanes here. This build is by no means a good Rhino build, but it is enough to play Steel Path. I have been able to take this build to Steel Path and play like 10 minutes on Mott with it and do just fine. Arcane Battery and Arcane Velocity are only in here because of the latest Belly of the Beast update video, where you would have seen how easy it is to gain these arcanes. But obviously these are just complete flex arcanes that don't require actually any amount of use to them. So by all means, use whatever arcanes you have access to, whether that be more damage or whatever. But this is the Rhino build. We've got growing power, we've got steel fiber, a crapload of strength, a crapload of duration, absolutely no efficiency and range because you're a solo player, I assume, and that is just the main thing. We've got energy nexus to supply us with energy since we don't have equilibrium on there, but we could easily put equilibrium on there instead. That works too. We could also obviously get rid of both if we had arcane energize or something like that. But nevertheless, this will give you, roughly speaking, I think around 11 to 12,000 iron skin. It'll also give you quite a large amount of raw. I think it's roughly 142% base damage increase on top of 60 seconds of duration. Really, really nice, really simple, gives you the damage to make really any gun work. It also gives you enough survivability where you should be murderizing things pretty easily, and you'll be able to progress onwards from there. As for weapons, there are two weapons that I recommend in the primary slot. I recommend the Felox, and I recommend the Fenmore. The Felox and the Fenmore both have two things in common. Number one, they are Incarnate weapons off the rip. They don't need to be farmed for on the circuit, which is really, really handy. But also, they are fundamentally some of the easiest weapons to obtain when it comes to Incarnates because they're just in the Zariman. And Zariman is a great farm to make because, again, Arcanes exist, specifically Operator Arcanes, and also Cascadia Flare, as mentioned earlier in the video, being really important. But they also allow you to get these weapons, specifically the Felox and the Fenmore. They do fantastic work. I'm going to show off a Felox build here. This is, again, a baseline Felox build, no arcane slot required because we're assuming you're going into Steel Path with this initially. And this is the build. It is just a viral heat build with a basic point blank, the galvanized mods that I mentioned earlier that are really easy to farm, some tactical pump and ammo stock for some reload rate, chilling reload, and toxic barrage. It is a status weapon. It does 9,000 damage on a full connection of all of the buckshot, and it does absolute wonders. You will cleave through hordes of enemies with this weapon with ease. It reloads fast. It provides a lot of fire rate and other fun stuff from the Incarnon options here. So that's really, really good, and it will do perfectly fine at levels 150 to 200. Next up is the Latum, same thing as the Felarx and the Fenmore. Latum is a really good weapon to obtain if you're new to Steel Path, because it is super suitable for it. It is a really, really fun weapon, and this is the build. Again, we've got that Cascadia Flare from the Zariman. This is something that you can grind for pre-Steel Path, really, really easy. Obviously, you'll need to do a little bit of Steel Path just to get access to actually putting it on the weapon. But nevertheless, Cascadia Flare is there for that exact reason. And then we have access to the Galvanize mods again. And then a Hornet Strike for base damage increase, Lethal Torrent because it's just one of the best weapon mods you can put on a pistol. And then we've got Pistol Gambit to help us proc our crits. And then Heated Charge with our viral option again for prime, for the viral and heat combo, and then that Pistol Gambit to help us with that little bit of extra crit. This just gives us access to that arcane velocity bonus, which is on crit getting those fire rate. Last but not least is the Praetos. You can build this weapon in whatever way you see fit. It is not for dealing damage. It is just there to give you mobility with the sprint slide speed as well as the parkour velocity. So it is a perfect little secondary, or rather melee weapon that you can use to help you get around the map and to do fun stuff with it. So don't even stress about the build on that weapon. You can build it however you desire. With that in mind, this loadout has been perfectly fine and serviceable in Steel Path and will work wonders, even with it not being some phenomenal set. So don't think that you need all these primed mods and thousands of endo worth of upgraded mods that are meaningful increases, but not meaningful enough to where it suddenly makes it where you can just randomly be able to play. You will be able to play prior to primed mods. You will be able to play with minimal investment. There are some Warframes that do this better. I just gave you a quick example of one that I threw together that is super cheap, and I know that pretty much every new player has Rhino, so that makes it even easier. If you are not playing as Rhino, you might be able to do it even easier. If you have Revenant, for example, and you want to just get to Steel Path, Revenant is ridiculous. He can actually go to, like, level cap with 3 mods. So if you haven't tried out Revenant, do that. If you want to trivialize Steel Path, do that. Play Revenant, insta-win the game, you'll have fun. Nevertheless, the last thing that I wanted to talk about was specifically, is there a reason to play Steel Path as a whole, now that you've finally prepared yourself for it? Is there a reason to play it for long term? And the answer is yes and no. Arcanes such as Primary Deadhead and Secondary Deadhead or Primary Merciless, as well as a bunch of other various like arcanes, are really, really important. The other thing as well that you're wanting to be obviously grinding for when it comes to Steel Path is something like Void Cascade, as it gives you access to the most amount of arcanes, meaning that you can trade them in and get yourself a crap ton of better arcanes like Arcane Energize and Grace and maybe Melee Influence or whatever it is that you want. So just overall, really, really easy way to grind out whatever you need in terms of arcanes, and also does provide some more optimal and more beneficial options for endo farming. It gives you better rewards in general, but I think as a whole is definitely not something that you need to do. I think the most Steel Path an average player should really be focusing on after they've gotten a full set of Primary Deadhead, Primary Merciless, and those must-take arcanes is probably just the Steel Path circuit. Getting more arcanes is cool, but you can only get so many before it becomes somewhat irrelevant. Not to say that there is no reason to play it, it's just that depending on what you're wanting to do, the amount of effort required to play Steel Path can sometimes be rather tiresome and tedious, and so just consider whether or not it is for you. I'd play it if it isn't for you, just for the sake of getting the various different upgrades, but other than that, you don't need to. Arbitrations, Steel Path Circuit, your daily sorties, and your weekly Archon hunts and Netracels are honestly probably the main repeat missions that you're probably going to do as a veteran player once you get to veteran player status, and I think that that is something to very much so consider. Nevertheless, I hope that I helped a little bit with my Steel Path guide for you guys. Just giving you a little bit of an idea of what a Steel Path viable build looks like, as well as giving you guys a little bit of an idea as well about specifically why I think that you shouldn't rush into it and what you should do to prep for it, because I see far too many people rushing into it and stressing out. Take your time. Warframe is not a race by any means. It is very much so a marathon, and when you're playing this game for the sake of rushing to the end game, you aren't gonna have as much fun as someone that just takes their time, experiments with new weapons, and enjoys it. Nevertheless, I hope you all enjoyed. If you liked the video, like, comment, subscribe, all that sort of jazz. Hit the bell, you know the deal. Every other YouTube video tells you anyway. But do all that sort of jazz. Come by the Twitch stream if you have any questions. I am live streaming absolutely every single day, playing War Thunder, another free-to-play game, over on the channel. So check it out, give some love, and I will see you next time. Farewell, and I'll see you soon. Bye!